I always believe everybody's a product of their environment. Right? I've interviewed thousands of people. Maybe 3, 4, 5,000 people from all different walks of life. But the one common theme I would say is everyone's a product of their environment. And I was reading some stuff about you in the last few days. There was an episode of your podcast where you talked about your father, Bill Fuentes, and how he wouldn't take the family, including you, to certain restaurants because he believed they were associated with African Americans. We would be deciding where to go to eat, you said. What are we going to do for dinner tonight? It was a running joke. Me and my sister would say Applebee's, and my dad would say we would never eat at Applebee's. Not in a million years should you be caught dead, Fuentes said about Applebee's. Go to a different restaurant, a local restaurant. No Applebee's, no Red Lobster. That is commonly known as black fare. And you also shared another story about your family and restaurants. It said, before me and my sister were born, my family had a saying about Olive Garden that contains the N-word that we're not allowed to say. So my question, based on...
Okay, I gotta say something. This guy's perception of reality, you can see his smug face. He's kind of like a dickhead. His perception of reality is just mainly the invasion or perception of invasion is a different principle of the perception of how cultures should integrate with each other based on an equation of prosperity. So when you have a culture that you deem as lesser or an invasion or something that brings no value, it's sort of like getting a honey out of a beehive. So when you integrate or you get into a place that you think is gonna hate you or not like you, it's associated with the fact that you even have them in the first place for their honey. And so this manufactured production such as honey or their perspective through a cultural understanding of their reality would realistically be your added value and understanding of why they are there in the first place and why you would account for them and aid them and uplift them, because their perceptions and understanding of the culture and the environment around them is going to be overall the additive factor of why they are valuable. So when he starts to call it an invasion, he calls it like a lesser, like a parasite, and that sort of behavior and discussion often leads to a fascistic understanding of brutalism rather than one of reform and understanding of building societies. So they will be a subtractive form to the equation of prosperity. In accordance to the understanding of why he's saying it in propagandized form is because he is a grifter and does in fact get money out of this concept. So the original understanding of what they deem as civilization or civilizing people was from the white man's manifest destiny, that they were going to show mercy to even some Native Americans and black people that they saw as lesser, even though this is again racism and the hatred toward a lesser race, but they still perceived them as someone deserving of mercy. And so this was the perception of their moral character within that time. So understanding that moral character within that time frame is understanding the concepts of you have no choice but to accept slavery because everyone's enslaved, and you have no power or physics to understand that the physics of which you encapsulate or are able to exhume or put out there is unable to actually make a change that's valuable. So a lot of the politicians, and this includes the Democrat left, and I don't want to shit on people like AOC or any of Kamala or any of them like that too much, but their perception of reality is true but false in the sense of the falsehood that they have is the equation of the cultural prosperity and the value of that. It needs to be perceived through the eyes of everyone else, because when you understand the core principles of human life, it's everything everyone relates to. But when you go on top of that, you have the characteristics of Americanism, which are the characteristics of Americanism are the cultural influences, and those cultural influences in them of itself is the prosperity, which is the preservation of other cultures. So preservation of Islam, preservation of the Latinos or the immigration from down south, the integration of the African integration, as well as the understanding of the history of the roots of slavery, and so reparations and understanding of the perception of that through the cultural protection of their neighborhoods and the cultural protection of policing of their own neighborhoods. It would help aid to the understanding, in fact, of health that mentally when it comes to a prosperous society, and helping it build an economy and as well as a cultural healthy environment is similar to building miniature neighborhoods that are respecting of their cultures to the degree it would almost look like small little segregated neighborhoods, which are already happening right now with black neighborhoods and Latino neighborhoods being the lesser housed areas and being of the poor descent. Then the overall understanding of the preservation of the whole economy of who adds value and who subtracts it is not only just added to the economy as itself, but also moral value as well as perception of tribe and mob justice being decreased to add to the value by investing in the other people to help them. And because you invest in the people, overall through the human core principles, which is every human being benefits from it. On top of that, you have so at the bottom you have the human core issues, and then on top of that you have the characteristics or the cultural influences of the society, that of which actually helps people. And that society that actually helps people is going to be the one that is going to be more prosperous because they get the most innovation, engineering ideas. They also help people grow and get self-confidence. So even though they're away from home or in another country, they will still be able to not only integrate but be able to be accepted in a culture that sees them and their culture as something that needs to be protected because it adds value instead of subtracts. Then people like Nick Fuentes here is clearly a subtractor. He wants to preserve what he perceives as the perfected formula of white people, and this perfected formula, of course, is only inclusive to the skin color, which of course is exclusive and more of a fascistic understanding because they want the authoritarian understanding of the socialist ideology, but removed completely to privatization, to Darwinism. And because of the Darwinism that they instill, the Darwinism in and of itself is something of a brutalist. If you can't work hard and make money, then you deserve to fail. And you deserve to fail because you did not work hard. Therefore, you don't deserve any help from the government. You don't deserve any aid. It's not the government's fault. The government already provided you everything with opportunity and aid with local businesses. So the perception, again, starts to become at the understanding of what exactly protects the people, what exactly adds value. And so when people add value through just only human principles, and then the cultural aspects are limited and their viewpoints are limited, then the perceptions of the benefits of other cultures are lost. And of course they accept that as something that they can lose because in their eyes they have always won. However, if that were the case, their perceptions is they are losing right now because the only thing they ever wanted throughout history, or in accordance to the analysis of it, is to have an all-white society. And of course, if you know people who actually govern and actually run things instead of him running a podcast, is similar to understanding that the people who govern know that protecting those cultures and those people are more valuable in the long term of the economy and the interpretation and the perspective of cultural influences, so that we can benefit from not only the perspectives of other cultures and what they add through the economy, but how they were able to manufacture through mathematical equations, as well as the understanding as the human core principles that add to everyone as a whole, which is the multiculturalism and the immigration as a whole that America protects. So when he tries to say that white people are the only ones that understand this, it's a failure because his white perception is Darwinism, which Darwinism would say anyone who is weaker should be killed off if they don't have the resources or education in order to adequately compensate. So this understanding of not being able to adequately compensate people is exactly why these cultural influences are abandoned at first hand, because people don't know how to learn from them, and they think learning as a whole is something that subtracts from them, which is an issue, of course, because they lose the perception of another side, and their perspective is what matters most because it's what adds to your society. So when you start to really understand perception through cultural value, either through the economic value or the actual cultural value, you understand that taking advantage of both by governing both and adding to it is better than just subtracting to the degree that you get nothing out of it at all. And this, unfortunately or fortunately, does include keeping some economy sectors purely Darwinism. And this is because it does create competition, and that competition is something that's valuable. It's a carrot on the stick for the economy, and it creates pioneers, engineers, innovators, and the unicorns that we value so much in our society through capitalism. So the continuation of this and the understanding of that is to truly understand what it means to push for something that is valuable to the whole of society rather than valuable to just one group of people, which already society has seen through his history. The accelerated growth through having multiculturalism is much more preferred over the slower rate of growth of just regular preservation of nationalism, which would be a one race society, racist society through authoritarian rule. But it would also be a misunderstanding of where they actually got their power from, which is now going to be their ambassadors going out to other countries doing trade and trying to perceive it through trade through there, where the exploitation of culture and the understanding of it would come through commerce, which is then sort of slave trade of culture, since the only ones who would be able to partake in trading the culture or trading the culture for money are people at the richer levels, and those richer levels aren't going to sell at other societies because they haven't been included in the culture to be able to understand it. And therefore that multiculturalism is the one where you're able to blend it together like spices in a more acceptable term, so that the entirety of it is accepted to a more appeasing form, to where instead of you have a hardcore culture clashing, you have a more slower mix, which gives you a better integration of trade overseas, as well as a better integration of maybe even colonizing without a harsh rejection of the people, since it'll be more of an integrative process instead of neoliberalism, which will buy up all the land, and people will have a better cultural understanding of how to integrate without offending the local populace. Now, because of this investment, it is something of more of a Democrat, leftist, or what I would call personally coreism, which is the core issue of our society. And coreism is something I personally am writing and hoping to get out there soon with some help, hopefully. So with the help, understanding these core issues and understanding the core ideas of what exactly society needs is more, I believe, advanced. And I call it coreism because it's abandonment of communism. It's not necessarily communism, though you can call it that. It does take advantage of the culture of Darwinism, and therefore takes advantage of the culture of conservatism or Christian culture and their ideologies of their conservatorship to understand that their Darwinism or brutalism understanding is a benefit to the capitalistic structure, as well as a benefit to any structure that advances it through a scientific algorithmic understanding of reality, rather than the one that is our false perception through a fantasy that Darwinism would always win because someone always has to just exist in front of the herd, which is a much more ridiculous, I believe, perception because it's a more naive one. And of course, Piers Morgan's rebuttal was genius, saying, aren't your parents Mexican? Which of course would be that the only reason that Fuentes is intelligent at all is because the mercy and the appreciation of the white man, or the person he perceives as superior that he's now a part of, would have looked at him as a lesser if it weren't for the integrative process that allowed him to be this intelligent or understanding of the perceptions of that he has. Which of course his ignorance is shown mercy within our society, because the educated people that invest in the cultural values through their perspectives and their understanding of why society benefits not only economically but as well as their moral value through understanding another person's culture is more valued than a complete abandonment. And therefore he cannot see, or his perception is blinded in the idea that even in his own religious aspects that says that you are blind and you cannot see, that he cannot see due to his ignorance. And therefore his ignorance makes him confident in the idea that he is correct because he learned from the person that won the battle in his eyes. However, the person that truly won the battle were the people that they were colonizing, because they ended up finding out that winning the hearts and minds of their colonizer was better than going to war, because winning the hearts and minds was something that was able to create a more prosperous society that they could all benefit from, and of course created interrace relationships and the continuation of a prosperous government.
That anecdote that you say